Oh, it's not.
Okay. Oops, sorry.
Ah. Before we start this session, I just wanted, this is a study session, I wanted to ask if the HRA members would like to please come up here and open up some of your seats for some of the other commissioners. Could I please have the HRA come join us up here? Thank you. And would you, commissioners, like to please join the front table, those of you who can? I know there are a few of you out there. Thank you. There are 3 seats open, so we might as well do that. Yeah, for sure. We can get the other commissioners up here. Make room. Thank you. So I'd like to call this special City Council and Work Session Authority Planning Commission meeting to order. May I have the roll call, please? That's okay.
I can turn it.
Mayor Gotell.
Here.
Councilmember Sandall. Here. Councilmember Fitzhenry.
Here.
Councilmember Rogie.
Here.
Councilmember Elliott. Here. For the HRA, Chair Sandall.
Here.
Commissioner Gepner.
Here.
Commissioner Quam.
Here.
Commissioner Rubenstein. Here. And Commissioner Gotell.
Here.
And the Planning Commission is Robert Hall, Josh Root.
A second.
Sorry, Gordon Zicki.
Okay, maybe
go.
I'll just jump in and say our normal process is to just say attendance is noted for the Planning
okay.
Commission.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Cheryl. I appreciate that. Tonight we have a special work session regarding the Pillsbury Common Proposal. We had an agenda item, and we also got a memo, most of us, and a lot of that was posted up online, I believe, for everyone to look at. I would ask that when Mr. Clark or whoever is presenting for you, that we keep this brief so we have a lot of time for questions, not a 45-minute presentation here, so that we can get some questions and going around, especially because we continued the last one and because we couldn't even get to questions from planning and from HRA. So if staff are opening this up, I will turn it over to staff. Mr. Stark?
Yes, thank you to the combined group. Staff doesn't have a lot to add. We were given a refined application from the Ron Clark folks for their land use applications. We had heard from the policymakers on several occasions that you didn't want to be caught surprised by information. You wanted to get information as quickly as possible so that when it did come time to make a decision, you'd had a chance to absorb that information, to ask questions. So at that point in time, we suggested that with the changes that Ron Clark was proposing, it would probably be a good idea to have this study session to get all the information out there and for you to address any issues you might have at this point. With that, I could answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? Okay, please. Make sure that's on. That mic should be green. It should be a green dot going for you. Yep, you're on.
Okay, excuse me. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council, members of the HRA, and the Planning Commission. I am Ron Clark, the proponent. First, thanks very much for giving us the time to present tonight and just for your time commitment for the work session. We appreciate it. Based on the comments that we've heard from the community and from the policymakers, we have continued to modify and to refine our application and would like to present that in a short format for you tonight. Since this is a work session, I'd like to we wanted to have all of our team members here, and I'd like to quickly introduce them if I could. We have from our company, Ron Clark Construction, Mike Roebuck, Mike Waldo, and from Landform, our site planner is Kendra Lindahl. From Tushy Montgomery Architects is Gary Tushy could not be here, but Dan Pellinen is here. And then from Stephen Scott Management is Barb Halverson, president of Stephen Scott. And from Larkin Hoffman is our land use council, Jim Susig. With that, I'll turn it over to Kendra she's going to do about a 15-minute presentation, I believe.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members, and commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to be back in front of you tonight. I do want to just give a brief background and then talk about the changes to our land use application since we were last here, and I believe it was January. Just by way of background, as you know, we've been working, or Ron Clark has been working with the city since 2009, when we became aware that this city and HRA land was available for redevelopment. And so in May of 2009, we approached the city council to review the concept of selling this property to Ron Clark for a rental apartment building. And at that meeting, we asked two questions. Do you support the rezoning from industrial to MR3? And do you support the proposed density of, at that time, 48 to 52 units per acre? And the answer to both was yes. And so we went to work on due diligence and started working on a variety of concept plans for the site. In 2011, we came back with a reduced plan that showed only a 70-unit apartment building. And at the June 14th council meeting, the council unanimously supported a resolution consenting to the process for the creation of a housing TIF in support of the project, and that resolution did state that 100% of the units would be affordable. Without this consistent support from the HRA and the council, the developer would not have proceeded with the development plans and would not have pursued funding and would not have invested significant time in the project in good faith. But given that, we did proceed, and this has been a very community-driven process, and we appreciate that, and that's typical of redevelopment projects like this. These are not simple projects. We have an industrial site that needs to be cleaned up, and there are certain steps that need to go through on these types of redevelopment projects. And so we had a significant community input process, and that's very intentional. The idea was to get feedback from the community, and I'm using that word very inclusively, the council, the HRA, the planning commission, the residents, prior to a formal application. So there's been some sense of information that's not being shared, but the point of that process was to gather information to inform plans. So we held a neighborhood meeting and 2 work sessions with the City Council, HRA, and Planning Commission before submitting a formal application. We also held meetings with other interested parties within the community to share our plans, to get feedback. And so in March, we submitted an application. We then went to the HRA meeting, and based on the feedback from the HRA at that March meeting, we revised our application. And we resubmitted an application, a revised application, on April 4th to respond to the stated concerns from the HRA members about the Land Use Guide Plan Amendment and density. The comprehensive plan is very clear that this property is guided medium to high density residential. And the comprehensive plan is also clear about the goals related to housing within the city. And so we've been very intentional about reviewing that legal document. That is the city's comprehensive plan. That is the basis for land use decisions. We have tried very hard to work with the city on a very transparent development process, and I do this across the country, and I can assure you that this has been a very transparent process. The information has been available, and we've reached out to meet with the city as well as residents. The revised plan is a very simple request. It's a very simple land use application for approval of a plat that meets all ordinance requirements and approval of a planned unit development. That planned unit development is consistent with the land use classification of medium to high density in the adopted comprehensive plan. And that PUD would be consistent with the MR3 zoning district that corresponds to that land use classification. When working with staff, we determined that the PUD allowed us to meet more of the city's planning goals, and therefore felt that the PUD resulted in a better development for the community. Again, as I said, the existing comprehensive plan, which was adopted by the city after a very public process, guides this property for medium-high density residential. The comprehensive plan is very clear on page 4-18 that medium-high density residential includes multi-unit and multi-building development up to 24 units an acre and up to 4 stories high. No land use guide plan amendment is requested by our development team. We are proposing development consistent with the comprehensive plan for a downzoning from industrial to PUD based on the MR3 zoning district. Minnesota statutes actually require cities to adopt a zoning ordinance that is consistent with the comprehensive plan within 6 months of adoption of that comprehensive plan. The existing industrial zoning district is not consistent with your adopted comprehensive plan. However, the rezoning to PUD consistent with the R3 would be consistent with the comprehensive plan. This is the apartment concept, and this concept has not changed since our March submittal. This is the concept that we showed you at our last work session. We're very proud of this high-quality apartment building and the nearly $13 million investment in the city of Richfield that Pillsbury Commons brings. Again, our land use request is simply for approval of a plat and a PUD for a 70-unit apartment building, and that PUD will also now include one for-sale single-family home and more than a half acre of open space. I'm using the term open space because we've had some very preliminary discussions with the city about whether the city is interested in taking that half acre of land as public open space or retaining it under our ownership as private open space. And that is something that we're interested in hearing feedback specifically tonight from the city council and commissioners. The apartment design with the PUD provides a lower two-story elevation on Pillsbury, which is a better transition to the single-family homes across the street. And then the higher elevation, the allowed four-story elevation on 77th, will help to serve as a noise barrier to the existing single-family homes. As I've mentioned in the past, the apartments would be professionally managed by Stephen Scott Management. I think we've talked a lot about that management process, but we have representatives here tonight if you have questions about that. The design that we've put together allows us to screen all of the surface parking from public streets. But the apartment also has underground heated parking where each apartment will have an underground heated stall. The project is transit-friendly and walkable with the bus stops nearby, including right in front of the building. The apartments again, have a craftsman-style architecture that's similar to many of the existing homes in Richfield that were built after World War II. And what's, I think, really fantastic about this project is the apartment mix, because it doesn't exist elsewhere in Richfield. I'm looking forward to the Stantec study that's being completed, but we know that there isn't an apartment mix with a lot of 2 and 3 bedroom apartments like our project would have. Additionally, it has a ton of what I would call market rate amenities, things that you would expect in a high-end apartment building, a community room, a fitness center, underground heated parking, the playground, good sidewalk connections to trails and other amenities, new landscaping on site, washer dryers in each unit. And additionally, this is a non-smoking building that will meet the Minnesota Green Building criteria. I wanted to note that, again, through that public process we've gone through informally before we submitted a formal application, we got a lot of feedback from the city, and as a result of that, we made changes to the plan. Our original plan had a driveway access onto Pillsbury rather than going through the old mortuary site. We eliminated that access. We eliminated all the apartment entries onto Pillsbury, and we eliminated parking on Pillsbury in direct response to neighborhood concerns. We added additional parking in the parking lot, and then we've acquired, as I noted earlier, additional land. We are proposing to acquire additional land so that all of this block, with the exception of the one HRA-owned single-family home and the one privately owned home here, would be part of this PUD. And again, as the Council and Commission knows, the benefit of a PUD is its contract zoning, and it provides everyone involved with assurance of what the project is going to be. By purchase of the additional land, we would be able to provide additional playground and tot lot space, as well as this yellow area, as I said, is that open space that we're very interested in talking with the city about. That was an issue that was brought up by a resident at one of our neighborhood meetings at a local church, asking about parkland dedication. Would you dedicate some of the land for park? And so we're very interested in having a discussion with the city about how that could be used as part of this development and fit with our development. This PUD ensures now a mix of uses, the single-family home, the apartment, and the open space that would be maintained, again, under that PUD, which is contract zoning. That's a protection for both us and the city, that this is what will happen on the property. The resulting plan, I think, is very neighborhood-friendly. The open space, as I said, responds to neighborhood concerns. And we now have a land use application that's consistent with our previous discussions, responds to neighborhood concerns. We listened, we heard what the city said. It's consistent with the comprehensive plan, and it's consistent with the city code. It is simply a plat and a PUD. We are also requesting, as a separate action from the land use application, TIF, as we've talked with the city for a number of years about, for this blighted and contaminated site. The tax increment financing, again, was something that was discussed in 2011, and although we are now proposing to buy more land at the appraised market value, we are asking for the same amount of TIF. We are not increasing our TIF request from what we discussed in June of 2011. And that TIF is a pay-as-you-go TIF, and I know the council probably understands that, but maybe everyone doesn't. But what the pay-as-you-go TIF means is that the developer pays these costs for improvements and cleanup and demolition up front and gets reimbursed over time based on the increased value of the land. So in summary, we're very proud of this project. We have worked very hard to try to respond to the legitimate land use concerns that we heard, and we think there were a number of them, and incorporate those into our plans. We have a plan now that responds to those concerns, is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the city code. It provides needed 2- and 3-story or 3-bedroom apartments in Richfield, and it provides excellent land use planning transition through good design. The sale of this land will bring blighted property back onto the city tax rolls. It'll provide approximately $65,000 in building permit fees to the city. It will provide a number of construction jobs within the city. It will respond to the facts of the market study. And again, it will respond to the city's comprehensive plan goals. And with that, we, as I said, are proud of this plan. We've worked very hard to develop a plan that everyone can get excited about and is consistent with the comprehensive plan, city code, and previous discussions. And we ask for continued city support as we move through this formal review process. And Madam Mayor, as Ron said, our entire team is here for questions.
Well, I have one just quick question, and I'm sure that many others probably have this first question as well. They've presented a different plan, and they say now that it meets the zoning requirements, but they haven't purchased the land, so it doesn't meet the zoning requirements unless we sell the land to them, correct?
Yeah, Madam Mayor and council members, just to differentiate, what they're saying is that they're asserting that their proposal meets the comprehensive plan designation, and that's true. It would need the purchase of the remainder of the city property and the HRA mortuary site in order to meet the densities to make it consistent with the comp plan. Okay. So yes.
Okay. And I'm going to start up here down the row if there are questions that would like to be addressed. David? Councilmember Elliott?
This is not a question, it's just a comment, and I apologize if this is offensive, but I was somewhat offended by your presentation, just in the sense that it sounded like an opening statement in a trial to me. A lot of statute, a lot of legalese, a lot of setting out timelines that are questionable and, from my perspective, aren't totally transparent. And I don't appreciate that. We don't need it. I was here to listen to the presentation of the plan and ask questions about that, not ponder whether or not you're creating an additional record for some reason less than honorable. And so that's just a comment. That's me, and I don't need to be reminded of what we knew or when we knew it or what was presented or what statutes may come into play. I want to know what you're presenting, and I want to know what kind of questions we've got to ask. Setting the stage for whatever may happen down the road isn't appropriate, and I was offended by it. So that's just my comment.
Came across that way as well.
I have the same feeling. And it's kind of funny because I had this written material here ahead of time, so I'm just going to say this now, and then I'll talk about the financing and all that stuff later, let other people have a question. But I want to go through this. First of all, we have...
Yeah,
I
make
was
sure.
using this. Yeah.
Okay.
We have a timeline also that's been provided by staff. So first of all, this doesn't come very close to what you're talking about. But let me put it the way I had it. You came to us asking if you could build a proposed single-family owner-occupied townhomes in Richfield, and we thought this was fantastic. I think most of us did. Then you came and said you would change your mind because of the economy and you wanted to build, I can't remember if you said you changed your mind because of the economy, if it was before or after, you wanted to build 160 to 172 units of market rate housing. You said that in May of 2009. It reflected me as a statement made by Commissioner Quam about his concerns a long time ago that this property was going to be tied up for at least 12 to 16 months. Well, guess what? This coming May, that'll be 3 years. We didn't change anything. We gave you our ideas of what we thought was good, what was bad, what our concerns was. And then you came around and said, well, now I want to do something different. We want to build, and this is a lot of different definitions here, but you called it Phase 1 and Phase 2. You were going to build the whole development area. You were going to build around the house of the lady who did not want to leave. And now instead you change your mind, and what you want to do is you want to take and buy land that you really don't want so you can build a building to meet code, zoning, density, and then you want to give the land back. But after you give it back, you've already destroyed the ability to make that as good as the other side of the property, because you're going to try to put a road through it, and then you're saying, well, we're just going to give you the property and you can build it a park. I think we've already said staff-wise that we don't need a park there because we have 2 parks on either side of it. So it's quite obvious when you came to the Planning Commission meeting, after you had pulled your application, that you're only buying the land so you can build the building, and then you don't care what happens after that. That's my feeling. You've now called it 100% affordable, even though as late as October of 2012, our staff reports used the term with an apartment complex, 70-unit apartment complex with an affordable component. I have that document here if you need to see it, in case you haven't reviewed it. So we went from market rates, which you denied you've ever had, to 100% affordable, and somewhere in between. You called it workforce housing. Now you're calling it life cycle housing. We've heard of family housing with an affordable component. You keep coming up with all these different terminologies. It's pretty hard to keep up with you. And so I don't understand why you would start this meeting off the way you did unless you are in fact trying to set something up ahead of time to go to a courtroom, and that bothers me. We want to work with developers. We've had problems with people that have come here and wanted to do something. I wasn't in favor originally of the place on 64th and Lindale, and they made great changes. They worked with us, and I changed my mind. Okay, so we have only done you've made it sound like that we voted for everything along the line. We've been told by our city attorney on numerous occasions in front of you that all we're doing is letting you move along where you're trying to take us, and that we're not able to do anything until you actually start applying for an application. So this idea that you set up a couple minutes ago that you wouldn't have done any of this work had we not voted that's going to change how we do business in Richfield if you really believe that process is what gives you the okay to just keep doing whatever you want to do here. So I guess I get to one thing is you've changed these things so many times. You've pulled your apps at least twice. You've changed things more than twice. But I'd like to ask you one question right now is, do you believe that you get to change everything and that we can't change our minds as you move around doing different things and trying to skirt maybe some of our zoning ordinances, our density ordinances, so that you can do what you want because tax credits are involved? So I just really like a yes or no answer. Are we not able to change our mind, but you get to change your mind and you get to come to our staff last week during Easter week and lay all this project on them on the 4th of April and expecting that on the 6th of April something was going to happen? The documents, and I do not blame our staff one iota here, this thing here says right in our staff report that you didn't supply all the information we need to be here tonight. So I'm just really confused about what your expectations of our council, our planning commission, and our HRA are. So I guess my question was, do you think that we don't have the right to change our mind, but you can change your mind at any time in this process?
No.
Thank you.
Councilmember Sandal?
Thank you. I'm interested in, you're talking about buying some additional land, which improves your density ratio, and then possibly turning it back to the development or the city for other non-developmental purposes. Is the intent of that, if that actually happened, would you be removing the mortuary and doing cleanup on the site so that when we got it back, it would, in fact, that would be mitigated?
Madam Mayor, Council Member, yes. In fact, the idea would be we would purchase the property as shown on there, and we would clean up the property.
Okay, thank you.
And then again, if I could, just to, we want to discuss with you, I'm certainly not saying you have to take the land back. We're certainly willing to keep that. It's certainly, though, a discussion we want to have with the city. Are you interested in the land for a public use? If not, we've discussed as a project team keeping it as private open space for our tenants. So it's just something I'd like to offer in response to a specific question from a resident or a specific request from a resident. That's why it was incorporated into the plan.
Mayor,
Thank you.
is that being given back or sold back? I mean, you asked a good
Well,
question. I'd like to
that's
know
a question, but when we can get around, we'll get around, save that question. Let's go around and see if we can get a few more questions. And Councilmember Fitzhenry, I'd like to let you have an opportunity.
Okay, I'm real inclined to agree with the other two council members that I feel like we were kind of backed in the corner, but just here's where I'm coming from. When this was presented as something you were going to build to have people move in, I was excited, but still a little bit on the fence because of the density of that area already. I think people remember me commenting on it, coming from my cop background. We don't want to stuff everybody in one area because it tends to cause problems. And single-family homes were probably, a go for me. Still sitting on the fence. But now this has changed from these single-family homes that people are going to buy to a medium-density to high-density apartment. And it's kind of like we haven't had a chance to really make a decision in this because we've been pulled along. And I guess if I were to use the acquisition, we were crossing this river with a horse, and on the other end, it looks like we're getting a donkey. It's a totally different thing. So, I wish we would have heard apartment right away. We would have probably had different decisions to make then, and that's where I'm kind of sitting now. I don't really understand how we even got this far. So.
Councilmember Rubenstein? Would you please just turn the mic over? Thanks.
I'd like to second the sentiments and concerns that Mr. Rogie and Mr. Fitzhenry expressed just now. And what's particularly concern to me is something that is we value in Richfield, and that is diversity. And this, as much as I recognize the need for affordable housing for people at all levels, it's really a value in Richfield to have a mix of incomes in these housing developments that have been coming here. And this one doesn't seem to have it to me. Can you confirm for me that this would be 100% affordable workforce housing?
Yes, it would be 100% workforce housing.
Thank you. That's my...
Commissioner Quam? Yeah. Questions? Comments?
Yes, I do. I guess the first one I have is just possibly the staff can answer it. It's been so long since we initially entered into an agreement with them or gave them an indication to go forward. I'd like to know what the terms are exactly of their ability to buy the HRA land. Can they do that in pieces? Do they have to do it all together? Or do we have to sell it at all?
Madam Mayor, Commissioner Quam, and either the city manager or the city attorney can jump in if they want to. I'm operating off of my recollection here. The HRA has, I believe, what's called a preliminary agreement with Ron Clark Construction. That agreement, I would characterize it as an exclusive rights agreement, stating that we will not, during the duration of that agreement, we won't sell the property to other developers. We won't really talk to other developers about them doing a project there. I don't believe that it bound the HRA to sell the land. That would have to happen under a separate agreement. That's my recollection.
And I don't have the agreement in front of me tonight either, but it is not an option agreement and does not give them the right to purchase. That is something that would have to be agreed upon.
Sorry, and the HRA's legal counsel, Julie Eddington's in the audience, and she did say that this is correct, what I told you.
Thank you. I'd like to then affirm the statements that have happened along the way here, both with respect to the fact that when we looked at this initially, it was a completely different proposal than we've had any opportunity to address at all as an HRA since that time. So any expectation that might come from an exclusive agreement that happened initially with a description of single-family townhomes being built should not be construed as an understanding, at least by me, that we would see this as anything near the same. I've got a couple comments on the land issue. If we even were to decide we wanted to sell the HRA land, which personally I have very serious doubts I would want us to do, because it so underutilizes the asset that the HRA has got. But if we were to, it seems to me that it would be better for the city to have you own it, increase the base of the value based on what you paid for it before we instituted TIF, so that you would at least be paying taxes on it. And that's just an observation that I have, and I don't know what your response to that might be.
If I could respond, Commissioner, we're certainly open to that. We just feel like if there is open space, it's important to have a discussion with the city about how they want to manage that. We certainly are open to managing it as private open space and maintaining it as part of our complex, but we're also willing to, and we had some preliminary discussions about, is it maybe a bike stop, with some sort of a little spot or something that's a public use. But our proposal as it's submitted has us owning that land. But we want to have the discussion about whether the city would be interested in us dedicating it to the city.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I'm going to go around to the commissioners that are across from us. I will start with Commissioner Jabs. No? Nothing? Maureen? Tom? Mr. Rivai? Would you like, and there's a mic. Would you please use the mic so other people can, do you have a mic? Somebody can hear. There's a lapel mic right in front of either way. Okay. Pass it along. Questions? I think if you start.
I'll just start talking and hopefully it'll pick up.
Pick up.
A couple of things. Actually, I'll limit it to the one. You described quite a bit of positive feedback and from the community and through the significant community process that you've had in this. And we've received quite a bit of communication from residents of Richfield, and I've been lacking the positive feedback, so I would really appreciate you gathering the positive feedback you've received that's kind of directed you and then move that onto city staff so that we would have the opportunity to review that positive feedback that has really encouraged you to continue on with the changes in the project.
in line with that, I would ask Mr. LeBlanc if he's here to share with us the response that he's got, favorable and unfavorable, with regard to the paperwork he's put out for the citizens. I have a fundamental question, I guess, with regard to the comprehensive plan zoning for this property. What did you say it was, please?
Madam Mayor, may I?
Please, go ahead.
The comprehensive plan guides this property as medium-high density.
And that calls for 12 to 24 units per acre, is that correct?
Correct.
Well, I seem to have...
Bob, speak in the mic, please. Thank you. Just make sure you have the mic up so we can hear you.
I seem to have discrepancy here in that we have, well, I've lost my way. How about that? I'll pass the mic. If someone else wants to speak, maybe I'll find my way again here.
Well, there's 70 units in this. Is that what you were talking to, Bob, that you wanted to know how many units were in this particular one?
Well, I'm looking at the comprehensive plan, and I'm having a hard time coming up with exactly what the density shows there, but I have two different reports from different staff people. The City Council Memo 14 says multifamily 12 to 14 people. That was written 2/12.
And maybe Mr. Stark can actually just clarify that question for us.
Madam Mayor, I can tell you that the comprehensive plan does designate that as medium to high density. Medium to high density is identified in the comprehensive plan as being 12 to 24 units. It is zoned industrial currently. It is correct that state statute requires a city to have zoning and a comprehensive plan that are in concert with one another. The reason we went through as a community last year or within the last 18 months and rezoned all of the properties that were not, that the zoning wasn't consistent with the new comprehensive plan, except for this one. The reason that this was omitted was because by that point in time, we knew that there was a proposal forthcoming, and it didn't seem to make sense to staff to go through and rezone it once when there was another, when there was a proposal on the horizon for which it may need to be rezoned a second time. It seemed to make more sense to address it all at one time. With regards to the density, our calculations based on the site that the developer is now intending to request the purchase of would, if you spread the 70 units across that entire piece, would be 23.7, I believe, 23.4, 23.7 units per acre, something in that nature. So on that density, again, if you spread it across the whole site, it does meet the comprehensive plan guidance.
Okay. Mr. Hall, does that help you with your question or your train of thought for your question?
Well, it's a complicated issue because we keep getting different information with regard to different things, and I guess 42 to 58 units. I looked through the comprehensive plan, and I'll be darned if I can find anything. You said page 418. Is that what? I don't see any number like that. So.
Okay. All right.
I have one other issue, I guess, that I'd like to mention, if that's okay. I wonder what would be the rationale for essentially radically changing the comp plan and destroying land value by buying with taxpayer money and donating land rather than spreading out the project and building townhomes on that property.
Okay. One of the, and I'm going to circle back around. I have a couple questions, and I know you do, Councilmember Rogi, maybe some of us, so I'll come back up here if you don't mind. When I looked at the fact that you were looking at the mortuary site and you talked about cleanup and everything like this, and I know that can be costly, would you be looking for brownfields and applying for those types of funds to do the cleanup? And to what standard would you look at a cleanup? I mean, if you do go to a park, you have high standards of cleanup to meet to make that a park area.
There are high standards for both residential and
Yes.
park use, and that is the reason that we have the TIF request. I mean, I certainly think we always look for other cleanup opportunities. I'm not sure that we, at this point, are required to find brownfield funding. Certainly, it always helps, but we feel that we've relooked at the numbers and we can complete this project as proposed, which includes the TIF, without additional funding.
Is there a phase 1, phase 2 already completed on that particular piece of property for the mortuary, so we know what it is?
Madam Mayor, there is a phase 1 only.
Okay.
We have received or are in the process of receiving grants for investigation. So that would be a phase 2 and a response action plan, or RAP. There, to my knowledge, there isn't any government money identified for the actual cleanup. We don't really know how contaminated the site is until that phase 2 is done.
Yeah, and I just, for people's edification, a phase 2 is where you actually drill and look for the contamination. You find the extent into where it's at and where it's located, and then you can decide how much it really truly costs to clean up a particular site. So thank you, staff, for that. And I wanted to make a comment about community input. I know when things became very heated that there was community input, but my concern is that there wasn't community input well before that, when you were thinking of a drastic change into an area that was going to go now high density from townhomes that these people had heard about, and that you wouldn't have thought that might have been enough of an impact, that you should have had those people at the table well before that was proposed, so you could have had those conversations and impact ahead of time. I think in this day and age, when we have Twitter and Facebook and emails and everything, being upfront and being more proactive is probably better, because I can tell you all the people out here in the audience know how to do a lot of this, and I even know how to text these days. So when I can do that, I think it behooves you to be ahead of things rather than behind them. And I think you actually were behind on this one, and I think that's why you saw a lot of people up in arms, and probably rightfully so. So comments of other. Councilmember? Go
Okay,
ahead.
I'll take a second thing. We have a letter that came from LAFC regarding, oh, I'm sorry. We have a letter here that came from Colleen Carey from Neil Garden through LISC. And I just want to read something on here that is one of the reasons I have concerns about this project, because this is what I've kind of believed all along. She says in her letter, Colleen Carey, and I quote, there has been quite a lot of conversation in the community lately about affordable housing. We want to let you know our position about affordable housing. First of all, we are not advocates of 100% affordable projects, and we are not intending to propose one. The current financing structure that is available to finance affordable projects is strongly slanted towards 100% affordable projects, and that is not a good thing. It means that developers of affordable housing are pushed toward the project regardless of whether that is best use of the site, the best choice of a neighborhood, or in the best interest of affordable residents. We have been working with our lenders and investors to develop a new financing structure that facilitates better projects, ones that incorporate a reasonable amount of affordable housing into every project rather than developing whole projects that are all affordable. We do believe that affordable housing is an important part of a project in providing a full range of housing choices in the community, but it should not be concentrated in ways that have a negative impact on the community. And then she goes on to say other things. The reason that's important to me is because all along, when I thought first it was going to be townhomes, and then I thought it was going to be an apartment complex at an 80-20 upscale, we got misinformation. And I'm going to remind you of something. You signed a document, I believe it's probably a legal document, that said that you were going to be finding renters, that you were going to make sure that you were looking for people of color and single heads of household. And then you signed that document. Mr. Clark, you told me you signed that document, but you weren't going to honor it. That's exactly what you said. I'm not going to let you twist this one. You said that you weren't going to honor it, that it was, because I had said that seems like reverse discrimination, and you agreed with me. Now, you signed a document, and then you come here tonight and you try to say, well, we voted to do all these things. We didn't vote to do anything except let you move your project down the road until we get to a point where we decide, is this going to meet zoning? Then you put a twist on it at the last Planning Commission meeting, and you say, we're going to buy land we don't really want. That's going to change the density. And you got really strong at the start of this meeting and said, this is all the things that you were doing all along, which isn't true. We've been led along. Our city attorney said, all we're letting you do is move down the road, and we haven't voted on anything because you had never given us an application, okay? And you seem to want to not talk about that point. And I've always believed that we need to do affordable housing in Richfield in the sense that it was going to be 80-20 buildings. I wouldn't mind if every building we build in Richfield is 80-20. This is not about excluding affordable housing. This is about not ruining this land that you're going to take half of it and now you're going to just chop up the rest by putting a roadway in, calling us that this is market rate housing next to affordable housing because you got one house there. I can't believe you made some of these statements. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I want that whole land developed, and you told us there isn't going to be a phase 2. Well, now it sounds like you got a kind of a phase 2. And that phase 2, I'm not really that happy with. I have a lot of concerns about that one. So what I want to know is if they keep just the property they have, what does the zoning and the comp plan say about 70 units on the land that they've got the right to buy? Because that seems to be an important issue right now.
And Madam Mayor, Councilmember Rogie, if Ron Clark Construction were not able to purchase any more land from the HRA or the City Council and was confined to the piece that they currently have the option on, they would exceed the 25 units an acre, or 24 units an acre that's permitted under the guide plan. And so therefore, they would need to apply for a comprehensive plan change and then would need to apply for a rezoning to a higher intensity, which would be the MR3, which is high density, as opposed to falling within the guide if they, again, spread their density across a larger area.
And if that happens, I guess this has to go to the city attorney. Two parts of this question. You've always told us along that when they come to tax increment financing, that's when we have to, once an application was filed, you know how I feel about TIF for everybody. I'm being consistent here. If I don't think that we should be doing another TIF project, and even other council members do, we have the right to say no to this, right? They've known that all along. I think you've made numerous statements that we haven't voted on anything in effect. So where would we stand on TIF and where would we stand on land use?
The council has the discretion to determine whether they want to use TIF, and yes, I think that you have been consistent in not liking TIF for development. So that decision hasn't come to the council, but I believe it is scheduled to come before the council on May. There's a public hearing, and I believe it's May 21st or 22nd. 22nd. Then with respect to the land use, that's not the current application, but clearly the council would have to determine whether it wanted to approve a change in its comprehensive guide plan. You're not legally bound to do that. That is a policy question of the council, if you wanted to change your comprehensive guide plan.
Councilmember, I do want to let Tom,
I'm done.
Commissioner Rublin.
Okay, I have a question in regard to this additional property that they are seeking to purchase. If they were to purchase it, it would make the land obviously bigger. They would meet the density and so on. They're purchasing that land to make a project legal, for lack of a better word. should they choose to remove that property, the density is no longer legal. Would that be a correct interpretation?
Well, without the HRA parcel and that second city piece, which the land that is not under an option agreement, without that land, I think Mr. Starks already stated, and I agree, this proposed development doesn't conform to the existing comprehensive land use guide plan, and they would need to apply for an amendment.
Okay, so let me just understand you, weak mind here. They go ahead and purchase that property and then turn it back to the city. The project is no longer legal, is that correct? I mean, the density is not...
Purchasing it,
If
their
they
proposal is to purchase the property in order to pull down the overall density for the entire block.
Sure, and as soon as they take that property out of it...
It would all be under one PUD. Their proposal is to keep it all under one PUD so that whoever owns it, whether it's the city or this developer or somebody else, that what's left of the mortuary site could not be developed with anything that would exceed the density requirement for that entire block.
So the city would be hampered at disposing of that property?
Well, it would limit the development, the PUD would limit the development of that site.
Okay.
Okay, and I have Commissioner Quam.
Madam Mayor, listening to this discussion and speaking as a member of the HRA, I note that the schedule that the staff has initially put together sets a public hearing on approval of the sale of the HRA property way out into May 21st. And it seems to me that whether or not the HRA should choose to sell the property would have a tremendous impact on all of the rest of the process here. Because if the HRA chose not to sell the property, this proposal would require a lot of different approvals than if we did choose to sell it. And I'm wondering if it would make sense for us to explore looking at that question much sooner.
I believe we're having a bit of a conference here with the attorney.
I think one thing they have is they have a 28-day notice to the
I think it is a notice.
Yeah. Madam Mayor, Commissioner Quam, the issue with having the HRA hear the land sale on April 16th is that does require a public hearing, and there is not enough time to properly notice that meeting.
Yeah.
The HRA could, I suppose, have a special meeting that we could have time to properly notice, that would take place earlier, because I understand your issue and your concern.
Just to add to that, as I think about it, I'm not sure if we have a current appraisal. I'm not sure if we have expert opinion on what the highest and best use of that property might be with or without that project. Those are all things that maybe we will need to know if we're to consider selling it.
Madam Mayor, I can talk about the appraisal. We do have an appraisal that was done in June of 2011 that the appraisal does make a determination of highest and best use.
What was that?
That was medium to high density residential, and it does have a value that it assigns to it. I know there was some concerns out there that appraisal may have been wrong, inaccurate, whatever. So as staff, we took the step of having a review appraisal done. We inquired with Kennedy and Gravens, the person at their office that does the most real estate work. He suggested a review appraiser to us. That review appraisal was done, and we got the report last week that confirmed the June 11th, 2011 appraisal, said that their numbers were accurate and that they did not contest the highest and best use that was determined.
Thank you.
Commissioner Scalia?
I'm confused. I may be perplexed.
Speak into the mic. You got to speak right into that one.
You're asking the Planning Commission to do either nay or yay this project, and we don't even know if the HRA is going to approve selling the land to them? It seems to me that comes first.
Do I have other commissioners who want to comment here? Mr. Hall? And then I'll get to you next. Mr. Rubel.
I agree that's a valid point. What comes first? That's one of the questions that I have. I have 24 questions here, but I'm sure you don't want me to go into all of those.
One at a time, and we're passing it around as best we can.
I wondered about the process, because normally we go through the Planning Commission, which makes a recommendation to the City Council, and we are the last to know. In this situation, as near as I know, the Planning Commission has a rule in place as of last meeting that we get information with regard to our next meeting 28 days ahead of that meeting. So are we now in a situation where we're past that deadline and we don't know what's going to happen? We've had no application for zoning change, for example. How are we to proceed?
And I'll let, I know that Mr. Stark wanted to comment on some other things, so please.
Well, first with regards to Planning Commission noticing, my recollection, and the chair is here, is that Commissioner Hall requested that the bylaws be changed to reflect what he just stated, but that those bylaw changes did not occur. So the noticing hasn't changed. That's my recollection. What was the other issue?
I don't know, you were going to, counsel up here.
Your Honor,
Please.
I think it was the order of Planning
Yep,
Commission
the order of the
versus
planning,
HRA.
right. And any Planning Commission action would have to be, and any City Council action, if it occurred out of sequence, would have to be contingent upon the HRA selling the property, unless the HRA had previously sold it.
Commissioner Rubelin?
Thank you. Relative to the discussion we had at the last Planning Commission about scheduling timelines and the clock stopping, by virtue of the fact that they have now presented this information to staff, has the clock restarted?
We haven't had that discussion to determine the timeline.
Okay.
You're certainly within it, and we'll have the answer by the time the Planning Commission meets.
Okay.
5 minutes.
Okay, let me, I have other, I need to round robin here. Commission, Councilwoman. Go ahead.
If you want to go ahead.
Oh, you want to, okay, quickly, because I got about 2 minutes I got to stop.
Whether or not it's 24 or 28 days or 14 days, we're still past the deadline.
Okay.
I just want to talk about the evaluations. Now, I understand that we've paid for, and we've had one individual do it 3 times on the land values. But I want to point out that I asked staff, and they got this thing to me really quick. I appreciate it. This here is the land values of all the houses around this property. 7,500 block of Pillsbury, both sides, 7,500 block odd side of Pleasant, and the so that covers all the houses. And what I came out with looking at this thing is that almost every lot, with the exception of 2, one was much more and one was just a little less. They're all valued, the lots are valued for taxes, which means they've been gone over once every year. These aren't old valuations. For 2012, they're all valued at $62,000 per lot. And every one of them is either 74 or 75 foot wide. These are big lots. And so what bothers me is that when I see estimates of what this land is worth, if you put 16 houses, townhomes on this property, by extending Pleasant Avenue all the way through to 77th Street, you end up with over 800 $50,000 in land costs. So if you do the square footage of this stuff, it's $62,000 a lot. Average lot size is 9,409 square feet. These numbers are not making any sense at all. They're low, and I backed that up because about 3 years ago, I met with different developers when I was trying to figure out what a Richfield land is, because I thought we were missing the point that location, location, location. I was trying to figure out what our values in Richfield were, and so I met with some developers who said that, if you're talking with Farmington, it was down around $10 a square foot. If you're talking Richfield, because you're around 3 freeways, it was $17 to $20 a square foot, green space. Well, I know the economy went bad, but I can't believe that we lost 2/3 of the value of our property when we don't get any more back. So I don't know if we are missing the boat here. You know, if somebody says something's worth so much money, that's just one thing. It's what people are willing to pay is what really matters. And I'm just worried that we're giving our land away instead of selling it. Especially if you use these numbers and you use developers. You know, I understand the difference between Richfield and Farmington. I just wonder if everybody else does.
Councilmember, do you have a comment?
Just one comment, and it's based on, I think, city attorney indicating that if the order stays the same, that we would be passing a resolution based on a potential contingency, and I'm not likely to do that. I'm not going to pass something and expect the HRA then to either pick it up or reject it. It's all going to be in front of us or it's not. And everything has to be in place, including whether or not they own the property. I don't think I'm going to address that until it's all in order and all in place and people have had their say and the votes have been tallied and they own the land or they don't own the land.
Okay. Did I have another, Councilmember Sandell, you're probably the last question.
Oh, just a couple things. One is it was mentioned that it could be done upon the contingent approval of the other body, and we have done that in the past. Just because sometimes timelines and development schedules don't always work as well as we'd like. I guess my other comment is there was some discussion about the roadway, and I just want to acknowledge that the developer, in fact, changed the road access into the property because the residents said, we don't want him coming out onto Pillsbury Avenue. So we can't really blame the developer for moving a road around that. He's trying to accommodate what the residents across the street have said. So I think just to make that statement, and a lot of what he's done has been to accommodate concerns he's heard from the residents in terms of people walking out onto the street, onto Pillsbury. They removed the doors, so they can't do that. They've removed the streets, so they can't do that. And that's to meet the residents' concerns. And so I do want to acknowledge and thank you for at least listening to the concerns that have been raised and that can be dealt with.
Okay, at this time, since we only have about 5 minutes and we have to set up for the next meeting, I want to thank Ron Clark and I want to thank your team for coming here and bringing the proposal and taking our questions. And I think we got a lot of good feedback.
Thank you, ma'am.
And thank you for coming tonight. And thank you for showing up too and being concerned about your city. We appreciate you coming here.
Are you giving